So this is Steve, and I'm here with Sharon Feasel. Sharon is with the Fort Wayne Redevelopment Department, and we wanted to sit down and talk with her a little bit about the New Markets Tax Credit program. It's here, it's a federal program, but tell me a little bit about the program and how it works and what it does.
Well, a little bit of history in the program is that it's been running now since about 2002. The U.S. Treasury allocates these tax credits to community development entities, and that can be a lot of different types of businesses. Most of the large banks, which have some requirements to do certain good works in areas, they'll create a community development entity, or CDE. A lot of nonprofit community banks create CDEs. And when the program came out, we thought a long time about whether we would be able to attract any of these tax credits to our community without forming our own CDE. If we formed one, then we could apply directly to the Treasury for credits and then sort of be in more control of where do those credits go, as opposed to just trying to attract, say, a large bank or a large other nonprofit CDE or whatever to bring some of their allocation to our community. They are credits that have to be used in low-income census tracts. And so if you can imagine, the majority of, a lot of low-income census tracts happen in really urban areas. Not that rural areas don't have them, but so a lot of the credit allocations were being drawn into some pretty severely depressed areas. It's harder to attract them to a small municipality. Well, not that our city is small, but a mid-sized city like ours that's not part of a large metropolitan area. So that's when we made the decision. We're going to form our own CDE, and we're going to apply ourselves for credits.
And I know there was recently it was announced that the city had been awarded $33 million.
Yes.
In these credits. It's a pretty good size amount, isn't it, for a city our size?
Yes, but what is really true about this is that it's while we say a $33 million allocation, it's an allocation authority. The actual, so that's the amount that we would, when we look at a project, it's not the actual cash amount that then is converted into the project. In other words, it's a 39% tax credit. So if you look at a $10 million project, it's $3.9 million of actual equity that then is raised by selling those $10 million worth of credit authority to the investor, and then that investor is willing to pay because they're now going to be able to take $3.9 million of taxes due off of their tax payment. So you look for investors who have a large tax liability, and then they invest in your projects. What it does is brings that equity into that project. So now you can bring an additional piece of equity to close a financing gap in a project.
I know when the program first started, it was considered a temporary program. I think it's renewed every year by Congress, and so that means that at any year they could say, we're not going to do this anymore.
Right.
Is that still kind of the way the situation is?
I think we have a lot of support. It is considered one of the bills that kind of regularly goes through the normal what they call the tax extender package, and there are a number of other programs that go through there, like low-income housing tax credits and various other kinds of tax credits that are offered. So we think it has a lot of support for continuation. Lots of congressmen and senators are seeing really good things happen in their communities. So we're looking forward to it to being continued, year after year.
Can you think of a project that might not have happened without these credits?
Well, actually, there's a lot of projects around the country that would not have happened. In fact, really, we look for projects that are projects that really need that extra little bit to get that gap closed, and they're not able to, find it. The way that the developer pencils out the project is, here's what it can bear. The amount of money they have, that can be brought to it is another number, and so it's often that there's a financing gap. But we've seen wonderful community projects like. I can remember seeing several ones that were really like community centers, had multiple different entities that all moved in, and were basically it was a fundraising type of capital campaign to try to finance the community center, and then New Markets would come in and fill that gap and kind of put it over the top. We've seen, I know of some who do nothing but historic buildings, and they actually twin the historic tax credits with the new market tax credits. Historic buildings are often challenging, with all of the new things we want to see inside a building as far as efficiency and sustainability and technology. But then you've got an old building that has out-of-date everything, old elevators that don't meet code, old wiring, everything. It's very challenging. And so these credits, these new market tax credits, when twinned with the historic tax credits, can be pretty powerful in helping to get a historic building rehabilitated. We've seen some fabulous projects done. In fact, I know of one CDE that does nothing but historic theaters. They started in their community, then they went like statewide, and now they do like the whole southeast seaboard, several states, but the only kinds of projects they do are historic theaters. So we're seeing some historic theaters saved.
So specifically here in Fort Wayne,
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a couple of the projects maybe that have been realized with that aid?
Well, we had $15 million of allocation from the 2008 round, and of course the time frame for receiving that, I think we were allocated it in September, just as the market was literally just disintegrating below at our feet, and so there was no financing to be had. And these kinds of projects, they can't be projects that can't get financing in a normal market, but in that market no one could get financing, and so it was very difficult to deploy that $15 million allocation. It eventually went to the new Harrison building, which was an $18.5 million project, and so we put our $15 million allocation into that to help close that gap that they had in getting their financing in place. So that's where our first allocation went. It went in one project. Mm-hmm. With the $33 million, we are looking at somewhere in the vicinity of 4 or 5 projects. A typical project is really a minimum $5 million project, just because of the complexity of the deal. We use a leverage model where that investor tax credit is only one piece of it. It's actually leveraging a typical financing structure for a piece of real estate or whatever the project is, and so it becomes cost prohibitive, or I guess the way to say it would be that you really kind of lose the benefit of getting that tax credit infusion if your project is very small, because it gets eaten up in some of the costs of just the fees and legal proceedings and accountants and other things that are required for a project. So we only look at projects that are $5 million or more. One of the good things about this particular program now is that some of those other CDEs that used to get very large allocations, they used to get $120 million every year from the Treasury. They are getting a maximum of $60 million And so they're interested more in partnering. So we're very hopeful that our $33 million allocation will actually leverage more new market tax credits into the community by other CDEs that say, hey, you're going to do this, let's say a $10 million project. Well, maybe we'll only need to put $7 million of our allocation in, and we'll bring another CDE in, and they'll do the last $3 million. So we're not having to use up all of ours on the projects. So we'll do some, and we'll share it with other CDEs, hopefully leveraging more investment in the community.
Sounds like that's a pretty important part of this for our city, is the leveraging. And talk to me a little bit about that as far as the importance of that.
Well, I think that 33 million sounds like a really huge number, and it will bring a significant amount of equity to the folks who are doing investments in the community. But by us being able to spread it more, it means more projects we can do. It means that the other CDEs that come to our community and see what we're doing, it's hard for them to see all the momentum that is happening in Fort Wayne until you get their feet on the ground here in Fort Wayne, and then they get it, and they really get it. And so that's what I'm hoping to see from this, is that we are able to, possibly double that 33 million.
And I have to say, I'm maybe a little bit off topic, but you've been one of the biggest supporters of downtown that I can remember, one of the biggest cheerleaders. Have worked on it, for years. How do you feel about the direction of downtown right now?
Oh, it's the momentum is getting stronger every day. It's like you can just feel that that people are so much more excited than they were. Of course, you were back there in the days, when we were still making the case for downtown.
Sure.
And people were still kind of saying, really, downtown? I don't know, I'm pretty happy just kind of doing my little thing in the suburbs and all that. I mean, we were working really hard to even make the case. Now, I think most of the people get it. We don't really have to make that case anymore. I think Harrison Square has made that case. Tim Ash and Bill Bean have made that case. We're now what's the next project?
Well, and have we reached that tipping point where it's kind of taken on a life of its own?
I hope so, but we'll see as we kind of go down that path. And what I'd like to see is those projects come faster.
Sure.
That's when we'll really know. Of course, we'll all be very, very busy, but that we'd like to see those projects happen a little bit shorter time frame in between each one.
Sure.
So.
Well, we got a little off topic there, but was there anything else about the new markets tax credit that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I guess in terms of projects, that if someone is thinking about things, we're looking for projects typically in downtown. That's the strategy that we wrote in our application, that we really think we're going to be focusing on our urban core and the urban neighborhoods around it. But it is not for housing, so it is really a cousin to like housing tax credits. So it's really a commercial tax credit, but it works really well with mixed use. As long as the project has a minimum of 20% of their income stream coming from commercial leases, then it fits. So that's why I'll say the Harrison fit so well, because you had 2 floors of commercial and then 2 floors of residential. So it works really well for those kinds of mixed-use projects. It also works for projects that really are going to have a huge community impact. Things that are difficult to finance, that have people who really are passionate about a particular project, but have to raise the money from scratch. And I think that in this case, new markets could be the kind of thing that kind of comes in and fills that last gap. What we want to do with it is make good projects better. that's really the key, is not to try to take a project that is probably not a really sound business model and try to backfill it and make it work. We want to make one work that is now going to be just over the top. Excellent project.
Sharon, we appreciate your time today. It was, it's been an eye-opening experience.
Thanks.
Thank you.